Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. It is Watches Tonight, and as you can see, we have redesigned the studio, an interim position while we build our new set. This is our new home for at least a couple of weeks. And because I know you've already signed up for your Hodinkee travel clock, let me offer a few accessories. Wild turkey for only an additional $3,000. A bird vaille skull for only $2,000. My glasses for only another $1,500, and if you act now, an illustrated history of Audemars Piguet. I promise you, I will find the cover. All of this can be yours for under like $10,000. I kid. Good to see you guys. Welcome from far flung. I could see Edward Ledden of Sweden, Robert Dixon of Scotland, Clive Williams, Burning Mr. B, and we are discussing the failure of watch renting and watch subscription services tonight. We're also contrasting leasing of watches and cars. All that, I'm sharing your viewer wrist shots tonight. Spare a thought for the people who pay for these pixels. Open a different window. TheWatchbox.com. 3,000 watches, pre-owned and vintage, live right now. The best place to buy, trade, or sell a watch. And if you're looking to do any of the above, I have a new direct service email, tmosso@TheWatchbox.com. Contact me directly, me and my crew. And yes, Sean, that includes you. Let's talk about some of your watches. Your pieces on my pixels piecemeal, starting with SKR. Mr. SKR offers love for Breitling, a brand we don't often discuss, with this Transocean chronograph limited edition. Rickar is downtown in the Windy City on Lake Michigan with his Nautilus 5712 looking great on a summer day. Abdul R in the Black Forest of Germany, and his early Tudor Heritage Black Bay Red have found an Alpha Julia curbside. I like both machines, nicely framed. Mario D rolls with American Carbon, old school Trek OCLV, and Swiss Steel in the Dolomites, and I love that too. Two very different takes on watches and wheels. If you think you can do better, remember, Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com is your email address for forwarding wrist shots. Let's take a look at who's joined us just recently. Simon Holt from Northern Ireland. We got Mark S. from Brooklyn. We got Sergeant 0331 from California. Jenks72 joining us from Wales. Thank you for staying up late in Britain with us. We've got Rick R. from Chicago. Hey, Rick, I think you were just on the show. And then we've got Matt Laughlin. We've got Jeremy Linder, Jean-Claude Beaver. JCB, you're definitely on the show later in the episode. And we have Turkisher Meister, our man in Turkey. We got Get Out of the John, Blue Shirt Buddha, Eric Nielsen, PT High from Paris, staying up late in continental Europe with us. Clive Williams, welcome guys. And Marcus G from Toronto. Marcus, I think you're going to like what you see in this episode. Now let's talk about something that is near and dear to my heart because it cuts right to the notion of why people collect and keep luxury watches. Renting and borrowing. Why watch renting and subscription services don't appeal. I'm not saying it hasn't worked in spurts or that it hasn't been tried or even that it hasn't received great fanfare. What I'm going to say is that renting and borrowing are bad matches for the watch hobby's unique psychology. To wit, they overlook the core appeal of watches, lasting beauty and permanence in a disposable world. So we spoke of the Apple Watch a few weeks back. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Apple Watch, and I explained why there's really no conflict here. While a lot of luxury watch fans love to hate on the Apple Watch, for me, this actually isn't a threat at all because it doesn't supersede any of the purposes or outlets that people fill with luxury products. You could actually wear both at the same time. The same logic applies here with watch renting and watch subscription services. No one wants an impermanent experience with a product that's supposed to embody continuity and enduring value. It's just jarring. It's completely wrong. And it's almost as offensive to the watch collector as the idea of renting a wedding ring would be for a husband and wife. I mean, if you're a couple, any kind of couple with nuptials and totems of remembrance, the idea that these things would be disposable or rented is inherently offensive. Why? Because of what the article is supposed to embody. Now, I love me some ring pops. These were the candies of my youth. I was, after all, a child of the 1990s. But I think you see where I'm going with that. And it's exactly the same thing with watches. It is an emotional failure to launch, which is why rented watches mean no memories. All of those good times, vacations, outings with your buddies, fishing trips with dad, you store all those memories around a certain watch. Sometimes, if you're like me with my Zinn, all of those memories become absorbed and associated with that one watch. I remember my trips to Switzerland, Watch Time New York, Watch Time LA, Watches and Wonders Miami, friends, family, outings with folks I hadn't seen in years, all with this watch on my wrist. And so those memories become a part of the watch, and the watch is a part of my daily experience. Every time I look at it, for example, I'll remember banging around SIHH, or I'll remember Watches and Wonders in Miami, and friends I met there for the first time, people with whom I'm still in contact. It was a big deal. Milestones in your life. You don't celebrate a graduation by renting a watch for a month. What's the purpose? The two things are incomprehensible. I mean, you're better off at that point just going out for a really nice dinner, taking some photos and remembering it that way. Because if you're going to celebrate with a watch that's gone the next month, you may as well not bother. Spend your money on something that's going to be fun in the moment, that's designed to be enjoyed in the moment. When I graduated from college, I got a Kobe beef burger with cheddar. It was the deluxe burger at, I think it was a place called Diane's in Hanover, New Hampshire, and I looked at that item on the menu through the window for 4 years. I finally got that burger the day I graduated. That is a good episodic expense. Now, finally, I'm also going to remind you that there will be no heirlooms in a world of rented watches. So while there's certainly money to be made renting them out to people who are into this sort of thing, it's not as though you will ever have anything to pass on. And that's one of the most appealing aspects of a true luxury watch. It's that it will be around. It's indefinitely serviceable, and it will always be desirable, not because it's the ultimate time-telling instrument, but because it's emotional and because of the way your son and his son, or your daughter and her daughter, will associate it with you. It's almost like a little piece of you living on. There's also a tacit admission, frankly, of financial inadequacy. Some people buy watches as totems of status, and on that basis, a guy with an average middle-class income showing up with a different watch every couple of weeks is pretty much going to expose himself as a poser. So if you're into the status side of things, it's probably the worst way to go. I remember when I was in the Navy, and there was a borderline predatory business just outside the gate of the Pensacola Naval Air Station, and that place would rent you rims. And they were the worst chrome-plated cast 22-plus inch junk you could imagine. But you rented them, which meant you didn't even get to keep them, which meant if you didn't make a payment, they were gone. And then at that point, you're basically exposed, which is like saying it's the worst of all possible worlds. Don't rope watches into that conundrum. So this is something, I will admit, the subscription service that tends to work better with much lower priced watches. For example, if you're talking about watches that cost, say, hundreds of dollars, and you maybe get to keep them at the end of the subscription term, or you get a purchase option, $200, $300, that's not the end of the world. You have different expectations for that kind of a watch. The problem is, some of these fashion watch subscription services are getting towards the $200, $250, $275 range. And at that point, you start adding up to an Oris or a Zinn pretty quickly. So you're talking real watch money if you don't watch, pun intended, what you subscribe to. Jumping into the box right here, we've got Romulus 1300 saying renting a watch is for a pretender, and it probably still costs more than a Tissot or Parnas. Matt Max, you don't actually own a burger, you just take care of it for the next generation. That's a good point. I will say this. We've got friends greeting us from Belgium. We got Arthur S. in the box. We got Kevin C. asking best watch renting companies. Well, I would have said 11 James. The problem is they went out of business. And that's kind of where we're going next with this discussion. Right here, we've got Eric Nielsen. Totally agree. I'm a few days from getting back my restored, reborn Gulf War Oris. Jabo Surf joining from Adelaide, Australia. And then we've got a friend joining from Thailand. Thank you for getting up early with me in Thailand. And then we've got Anthony Napoli, we've got Simon Holt, we've got Andres A, and we have a question on wearing two mechanical watches at the same time. This is from Andres. Should it be socially acceptable? I think you've got to do it with tongue-in-cheek. Like, I've done this wearing two watches, but one of them has been a Jaeger LeCoultre Tourbillon, and the other was a Swatch System 51. So it depends. First of all, are you taking it dead serious, or are you being a bit facetious about it? And two, do people know this? On the other hand, you could just go with my old maxim, which is to hell with everyone else and wear what you like. If you want to double up the watches, it's absolutely acceptable, especially when traveling, when you can have one watch set to home time and one watch set to local time. I've done it, and it's a blast. Okay, we've got Hamed T joining from Tehran, staying up way late with us. I really appreciate that. And Thomas Burnett with thoughts on the interesting topic right here. It's about to get more interesting, but let's take a look at some of your wrist shots. All right, Tariq C and his wife celebrate their 5th anniversary with a Moser Menard, early modern Moser, and steak. That's a hell of an evening. Dylan C, and by the way, congratulations. Dylan C shares the Zinn EZM 1.1 he bought from Watchbox, and a Pomeranian he borrowed from a friend. So you've got a German dog breed and a German watch, both nicely paired. Watches and dogs shots, guys, send them. I love them. We've got Andreas W. and his Generation 1 39mm Rolex Explorer exploring northern Sweden this summer. He's got the shorthand in the house. And Peter K. and his Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean GMT hit the road with Mercedes-Benz watches and wheels. You know I love them. I love cars. I love watches. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on my pixels. Okay, the fad factor. Now let's talk about another reason why watch renting and watch subscription services have not succeeded. Every era sees the rise of some consumer fads that seem to flourish and fade with equal ferocity and speed. Ultimately, most of these things, even if they continue at a low level, will fade into obscurity after their moment in the limelight. The 1980s had Dippin' Dots. Do you remember the Flash liquid nitrogen frozen ice cream product? Well, if you haven't been to a theme park or a ballpark recently, chances are your memory has lapsed. The 1990s had miniature pet pigs foisted on owners who basically expected they were getting pink dogs and then realized they were getting destructive and aggressive foraging animals that weigh almost as much as they do. By the way, if you have one of these things and it's working out, send me a watch and a pig shot. I would love to know of a success story with a pet pig from a watch enthusiast. The 2000s had pigs, well, of a different kind, as the Hummer H2 enjoyed its moment of fame and later infame. And then there was the dead-end Nintendo Wii, which, frankly, people went nuts interpreting as the equivalent of a gym membership in their house before realizing that a dance pad and a baton in your living room is not going to get you fit. What do all of these things have in common with watch leasing? Of course, along with renting and subscription services, their time sort of came and went. For a brief period in 2013 and 2014, it really did look like watch renting could be a breakthrough. I remember 11 James at this time, which was renting out Rolex, which was renting out Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, IWC, high-end watches, in other words. These weren't micro-brand pieces that you could buy at the end of the lease for $150. All of which is to say, this was a legitimate experiment in whether renting of luxury watches via a subscription service was going to be viable. Well, I remember in 2014 at Watch You Want, we had to answer a flurry of questions from potential investors about two things. One, smartwatches and what we planned to do about them. That turned out to be a non-issue. And then second, what was our plan for watch renting and watch subscriptions? And frankly, that turned out to be a nothing burger as well, as after burning through something like $40 million of capital, 11 James went out of business in the summer of 2018. So what was the conclusion? Don't work. Problems. Again, every problem we have with renting, we have with subscription services. The impermanence of a permanent product. Viewer wrist chats number 3. I asked, you answered, and I always like to show your watches on this box. And Frank from New Jersey shows us an unusually attired Rolex Yachtmaster dark rhodium dial as he enjoys Sam Adams, a U.S. beer. Nice. I like your Swiss watch and domestic beverage. Marcus G combines his Moser Endeavor perpetual calendar in platinum with his pug. I love pugs and I love Moser. That's probably the winning shot of the night. Umberto T impresses with his outstandingly preserved heirloom Rolex Oyster Perpetual date from 1985. And Mr. Enigma shares his Seiko Bright's Phoenix SAGK007 in flattering light. What a dial and a strap to match. That is a classic wrist shot right there. Okay, remember, Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com if you want to see your watches right here on this box. Jumping into the chat box for a moment. We have a question about why I am wearing a mask. We've had a bunch of outbreaks here in the office, and I'm just playing it safe. It's more to protect my staff than to protect me. Right here, we've got Burning Mr. B, hi from Holland, Romulus 1300, a question about gold G-Shocks. Well, if we're talking about the solid gold G-Shock, that's a question and a quandary only 35 people will have to confront. We do have one in stock if you're interested. Again, open a different window, thewatchbox.com, G-Shock Dream Project. And right here, we got Patrick Shields saying, hey Tim, how's it going? Patrick, it's going well. Better now that you're here with us in the chat. We've got Jan G saying, be safe, best to all. I agree with that sentiment. And then right here, we've got Anthony N asking, question, Tim, how much would you spend on an engagement ring if you collect $20,000 watches? I have no idea, but I think if I were that into watches, I'd probably just give her a watch. That would probably be my solution. Maybe a ring with a JLC caliber 101 built in. And then right here we have Ashay Sahay saying Pomeranians are the Daniel Wellington of dogs. I don't know if Daniel Wellington is quite as nippy as a Pomeranian. Otherwise, great comparison. And then right here, we've got J-Bo saying, we're selling a G-Shock for $106K. I guess they'd want to avoid that topic. Hell no! We're selling a G-Shock for $106,000. I actually thought it was $104. But if you're interested in owning the only one in your block, hey, we've got it. I'm not going to argue with the logic. It's not something anyone needs. But then again, neither is an immaculately hand-finished Jaeger LeCoultre. It's all a matter of priorities. Bum, 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 bum. We've got Eric Med saying, I sent my watch 2 times and it was never featured. Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. Note in the comments section of the email that you're the guy who wasn't featured, and I'll be sure to fast track that. Okay, right here. By the way, yes, Long Branch Bourbon from Wild Turkey, we had a comment. Someday I might drink this on the air, and if you guys send me enough money, I might drink all of it. Okay, jumping back into our regularly scheduled program and why leasing of watches isn't on the table. There is a subtle difference between renting and subscription services and leasing. And this is where I think a lot of people start to make the connection to cars that works in almost all other aspects of comparison of the two hobbies. But the car comparison finally fails when leasing is on the table. So I recall an executive from the Watch You Want days back in circa 2015 declaring with confidence that the future of luxury watches was watch leasing. And if you wonder why the Cadillac CTS-V Coupe is up there, it's because that's a car I would love to own and I wanted to use it as the featured photo. But he was saying that the future of luxury watches was watch leasing. And to be fair, this guy, I'm not trying to say I told you so, he had a great track record in the industry. He was a pioneer. He was doing pre-owned watches back before you could even buy a watch online from a brand. He liked watches and cars. He was making a good faith effort at prediction. It was a seemingly logical leap from one idea to another. First, let me acknowledge all the arguments earlier about permanence apply here, but there's more to meet the eye when discussing leasing specifically of watches. This is why the car comparisons fail to apply, and why there are consequences for factory certified pre-owned programs. This is why I don't think you're going to see certified pre-owned in the world of luxury watches, at least not on a large scale. And I should also mention, this is an entire economic ecosystem in the car space that doesn't exist in the watch world. Let's start with the most basic. Leasing is driven heavily by in-house credit arms at automakers. One of the main reasons leasing now amounts to more than half the business for companies like Audi, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, and almost 3/4 of the business for Maserati, is because they have in-house financing arms that are able to make money off the car without selling the car. That's the first part of the economic ecosystem in the world of car leasing. The second is when that car comes back with agreed residuals, it can then be pre-owned leased, or it can be sold as a certified pre-owned car. All of which is to say there's a way to monetize that car 2 or 3 times before it actually leaves the custody of the automaker that built it or the dealer that first dealt it. There's nothing like that in the watch space. No brand has an in-house credit arm, and that's because overwhelmingly luxury watches tend to be bought with cash. That is a huge difference between the watch sector and the car sector. The lack of in-house credit arms is also a huge difference. There's no need for them when people are just going to write a check. I should also mention that if companies were going to lease watches, that is, the manufacturer itself were going to lease the watch, there would be the unpleasant matter of discussing residuals, and this is something watch brands do not want to do. If they admit that at the end of the lease, a $30,000 watch is going to be worth 60 or 55% of its original retail price, then the cat's out of the bag, and they have to admit to this up front in the showroom. And here's the thing. This is something no watch brand wants to do. So while there are some small-scale attempts at factory pre-owned, there's Patrimony with F.P. Journe, Linda Verdlin has their tongue-in-cheek vintage collection. The company's only been around since 2005, but they call it vintage. These are small-scale independents that make hundreds of watches a year and are hoping to maybe resell a few dozen interesting pieces a year. They are not trying to put a price on their mainstream used watch. This is something that Omega, this is something that Breitling, this is something that none of the Richemont brands want to do, which is why they don't want to get involved in leasing, because the blowback would be tremendous. And, let's face it, they would be a little bit exposed. So here's the thing. Leasing in the watch world also doesn't make the same sense that it makes in the car world, where you might want to have perpetually a new car that's under warranty. Watches don't age like cars age. Think about this. A 2005 W220 Mercedes S-Class is now going to be a jalopy sunken on its busted aromatic suspension, dragging its sill panels to the high school where the owner goes to class. That is a 2005 Mercedes-Benz. What happens to a 2005 Rolex Submariner Kermit? Well, frankly, if it's been well kept, nothing. That's still a great watch to own. It's worth more than when it was new. It works just as well as when it was new. It can still be used for diving. Apparently, this is the kind of thing that represents the biggest divide between the watch and the car world, which is just that the watches don't age out of service. They don't eventually find their way to the scrap heap, which means you simply have more and more and more of them on the market. And that's just not the case with late model luxury cars. I will also mention that there are those entire economies built around leasing of cars. Here's a breakdown of how leasing affects auto brands. You go from a low with Ferrari, about 4%, up to a high of about 3/4 with Maserati, which is to say, Ferrari, a brand for which people generally pay cash, is a lot more like a luxury watch, whereas most of these leasing brands, their business model is very different from that of the watch world. So here's another thing. It's easy to track the history of a car. So when you buy CPO cars, you know exactly where the car's been. Has it had a little bit of paint work? Maybe. It's impossible to rule out. But has it been wrapped around a pole? Probably not. That's the kind of thing that AutoCheck and Carfax will pick up. And if a watch has been absolutely creamed and then polished down to a cinder, you probably wouldn't know if you didn't know to look for it. And here's the other thing. At the end of the day, the myth of the investment will never die. Back in the watch you want era, we had discussions with a large watch brand. It was a Holy Trinity watch brand. I'm not going to divulge which one, but they eventually couldn't get their head around the CPO idea because they said, look, we've been telling for years our customers that their watch is an investment. How do we then take back that rose gold dress watch and tell them that we can only pay them 50% of what they paid us in cash 18 months prior? And that is why you won't see watch leasing. Now, viewer wrist chats. But first, let's take a look at the chat box tonight. Bum, 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 bum. We've got a question from Romulus 1300. What's the margin on a $5,900 travel clock? Too high. Like I said, everything you see here, including my glasses, autographed for the price of the Hodinkee travel clock. I'm dropping the price. I'm making a very fair offer. I've probably got as much invested in this stuff as they have in one of those clocks. We've got Rooted Rotor joining in. We've got UEL. Tell me how phonetically that's pronounced, because I want to get it right. UEL. We've got David Datura. We've got Nordic Monkey saying, I love the sound of my 981, and I didn't think it was worth the extra money. I didn't think the new one was worth the extra money. Maybe if they had shortened the gears. All right. Let's see what else you guys are saying. Sam Leno, love from London. Thank you very much, my man. And NATO Steve saying, great insights. I appreciate that. I do my best. A question from Andrew. Do you really need a mask on right now? I don't necessarily, but again, this is here for the protection of my staff. We've had some outbreaks around the office. I'd rather be too careful. Right here, we've got FRNK. Do you consider a Patek 5227R a good heirloom to pass down, or should it be something with more complications? Hell, if someone gave me a Hunter Caseback Patek Calatrava as an heirloom, I would have no complaints. I think that is just swell. All right, jumping back into your wrist shots. I always like to say, you guys have the last word, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. Robert M. and his Zin 104 joins us from Maryland, USA with the official state flower. Vivek R. showcases watches and wheels with the first Zin U50 I've seen in circulation and his Tesla. Russell K. of the UK and his Patek Philippe 5131R highlight the Ring of Fire, the Pacific Rim in enamel. And Christian F. takes us home with his new Rolex Cellini date in white gold. Wear it in good health. As ever, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. Comment and subscribe, guys. Let me know below. What do you think about watch leasing, subscriptions, and rentals? I've said my piece. Now you can say yours. Thanks so much to Sean for working the switcher today. Thanks to my many sponsors, Time Out, Tim Out, and thanks for logging on.